Deep fryer hissed. Fluorescent lights hummed, the only sounds in the vast emptiness of the Burger Palace. Jerome, 6'2" and built like a linebacker, wiped down the counter for the 100th time. 3 a.m., the witching hour, his least favorite time. He glanced at the rain lashing against the windows. The red neon sign outside flickered, casting dancing shadows on the empty booths. It was nights like these that made him question his life choices. College dropout, working the graveyard shift, Mom would be thrilled. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Jerome shivered, pulling his greasy apron tighter. His stomach rumbled. He hadn't had a decent meal all day, just lukewarm coffee and a stale donut. He longed for the comfort of his bed, the warmth of his blankets, but for now, he was stuck here, alone, with the silence and the shadows. A ding, announced a customer. Jerome looked up, surprised. Nobody ever came in this late, not in this weather. A lone figure stood silhouetted against the downpour, tall, slender, with an unruly mop of hair. The figure stepped in, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the smell of wet asphalt. It was a young man, barely out of his teens, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through Jerome. "Can I help you?" Jerome asked, his voice echoing in the empty restaurant. The young man just stared at him, his lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile. He looked familiar, but Jerome couldn't place him. "Cat got your tongue?" Jerome chuckled, trying to break the tension. But the young man just kept staring, his smile widening. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was predatory. Two more figures materialized from the rain. A woman in a long white dress, her face obscured by a veil. A hulking man in a trench coat, his face hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. The trio moved with an unnatural grace, gliding silently across the floor. Jerome felt a chill crawl down his spine. This was wrong. Very wrong. They stopped at the counter, their faces still hidden. Jerome could feel their eyes boring into him, cold and calculating. The woman whispered something, her voice a dry rustle like dead leaves skittering across pavement. The hulking man chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated in Jerome's chest. The young man with the blue eyes just kept smiling. Jerome's hand instinctively moved towards the phone under the counter. 911. He needed to call 911. But something held him back. Fear or something else? Section 4. The Unsettling Order. Triple cheeseburger, the young man finally spoke, his voice raspy as if unused for years. Extra pickles, and a strawberry milkshake, with 2 straws. The woman whispered again, her voice like fingernails scraping down a chalkboard. The hulking man slammed his fist on the counter, making Jerome jump. His blood ran cold. He couldn't understand a word they were saying, but their intent was clear. Menace dripped from them like the rain from their clothes. He fumbled with the register, his hands shaking. "That'll be..." He couldn't even speak. His throat felt like it was closing up. The young man leaned in, his blue eyes burning into Jerome's. "Don't worry about the price," he whispered, his breath hot and foul on Jerome's face. "You'll be paying us back, with something much more valuable." Jerome stumbled back, knocking over a tray of ketchup packets. The trio watched him, their expressions unreadable. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to get out of there. He had to run. He bolted for the back door, his eyes darting back to the figures. They hadn't moved. They were just standing there, watching him, as if they were toying with him. He fumbled with the lock, his fingers clumsy with fear. He threw open the door and ran into the night. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the smell of ozone, like after a lightning strike. He didn't dare look back. He just ran, his lungs burning, his legs screaming for him to stop. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of his apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it behind him. He collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath. He had escaped. But what had he escaped from? The next morning, the sun streamed through his window, painting the familiar room in a warm glow. He lay in bed, the events of the previous night playing on a loop in his mind. Had it all been a nightmare? A hallucination brought on by stress and stale coffee? He forced himself to get up, his body aching with exhaustion and terror. He went to the kitchen to make coffee, his hand trembling as he reached for the mug. That's when he saw it. A single, pristine white feather lying on his countertop. It was identical to the one adorning the hat of the hulking figure. His blood ran cold. It hadn't been a dream. They were real, and they were watching him. He stared at the feather, a sense of dread washing over him. His life as he knew it was over.